Greetings, everyone. What's going on? It's DJ Payne1 with two very special guests, two people that I've never spoken to directly, but I know quite a bit about. We have Deborah Mannis Gardner, and we have Per from Tracklib.
Hi.
Hello.
Thank you both for your time and expertise today. Classic novels, classic poems, and of course classic hip-hop tracks often include a sampling of previous pieces, and sampling in some form has always existed, but laws governing samples have not. And because these laws exist, we as producers and recording artists need help navigating that legal maze. So I figured who better to help with that journey than the sample queen herself, Deborah Mannis Gardner, and the CEO of Tracklib, Per.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Just a light question to begin with. In what capacity are the two of you working together?
We're partners in Tracklib. So, Deborah joined in when Deborah popped on our radar. Tom Silverman and I said, we have to get in touch with Deborah. And then we met in New York, and it was kind of instant.
The connection was just incredible. He has the same love and excitement and appreciation and understanding of sample clearances, something I've been doing since 1990. And to meet someone that has that same energy as myself, I knew that I had to partner with them.
It just worked out. It was an instant connect, and we didn't stop talking since.
And that partnership has been a long time in the making then.
It's a year and a half, is it?
We met the day after Thanksgiving. We met November 1st of last year.
Oh, yes, it's a year.
Yeah.
We should celebrate. Well, we're meeting next week, so we need to celebrate that.
To be partners with a company that has the same feelings that I do about samples, and then to watch them grow into this incredible organization that is making samples easier, affordable, acceptable, and educating. And that's my whole thing. I'm not just here to clear people's samples. Sometimes I tell people not to sample because they don't have the money. But now I can say, you don't have the money? Go into Tracklib. Go through, there are crates there. So it used to be a year ago, if you don't have the money, you can't sample. Now I can say, if you don't have the money, go to Tracklib.
If you could boil down into one concise sentence what Tracklib's main function for producers and recording artists is, I think Deborah's already done that. How would you do that, Per?
Simple. We let every producer in the world legally access and sample from original recordings. That's it. We're building the world's biggest crate to dig from. And this has been we've done this, all producers wanted to do this easily for decades, right? And I have a producing background myself. So, we knowing the topic intimately. And then it just had to be done. So, this is made by producers for producers, just access to amazing original music.
Back in the 90s, you would go to record stores, you would flip through everything. You'd be on the street buying vinyl. That's how we did everything. Move forward, everything's become digital. How are you digging through the crates? You're on YouTube, you're on Apple, you're on Spotify, you're digging electronically. Imagine what Tracklib is. It's kind of like that record store, kind of like all of that stuff, but become digital, but already licensed. So it's taken the past and made it current technology-wise for these producers. It's also made it so that, again, with technology, it used to be when you wanted to create something yourself, you needed the money, the studio, the equipment. It really added up. What Tracklib has done, and because, again, technology with everyone having a phone or a laptop or a tablet, having that ability to create music economically, technology-wise, and then with the music itself. It's a great idea how this all comes together. It's brilliant.
So whose music is on Tracklib?
It's really diverse. We usually say it's the inverse of Billboard Top 100, but it ends up on Billboard Top 100 as samples. So we have everything from, the oldest Chinese music ever recorded, dating back to 1919, to amazing soul and funk and R&B and jazz gems from the 60s, 70s, to even contemporary Scandinavian electronica. So it's a wild crate to dig. All of it, I think the unifying part is that it's real, original, published and released music. That's also in many cases available on the streaming services. But we also have world unique stuff. We got some labels to go back and recreate multi-tracks and stems for us. So we even have isolated soul vocals from the late 60s and reggae vocals from the late 90s. So it's all this unique stuff on there too.
Yeah, your early dancehall collection is pretty amazing. I logged onto the site, and instead of finding samples, I just ended up listening to music for half an hour. Anyway, so here's a can of worms. What would you say is the biggest misconception with regard to sample clearance that you're aware of currently?
It's funny. Again, I've been doing this since 1990, and I'm still educating the youth, which is like the needle drop. Well, if I only use 3 seconds, do I need to clear it? You sample anything. You take something that is pre-existent of someone else's material. That is sampling. You need to clear it. It goes back to my analogy. If you steal a piece of bubble gum and you steal a fur coat, are both scenarios theft? Yes. It just it has a lot less value than the other.
So just to be clear, if you sample any part of a copyrighted recording, that's a sample you have to clear, right?
That's correct. Whether it's 2 seconds or 2 minutes, you need to clear it. If you've lifted that original recording, you need to clear it. If you replay it, it's a different story, because then it's a publishing use only, and you can't really copyright 2 notes or 3 notes.
And I want to talk about the difference between those two, but you've been in situations where major artists, just to drive this point home, have used just a couple seconds of a sample and gone through the entire sample clearance process.
Absolutely. Yeah, they've lifted it was like 1.75 seconds of a master recording and then looped it, and we had to clear it. And you're kind of like, well, why are you doing it? But, a lot of times it's done because they like the way it sounds. It's got this feel to it.
Back to what you were talking about with replays, there have been some major misconceptions about replays and interpolations because of this Juice WRLD versus Sting situation. And to also be completely clear, interpolations/replays have to be cleared as well.
They do. I mean, if it's, the same words, or if it's the same melody, or if it's the same hook. There's a fine line, though, because, as you know, there are some accusations and claims made because it sounds similar or it's influenced by, and that's not copyrightable. But once you plant that seed, it seems to lead to litigation. I think if we were talking about a different genre of music, if it was country, if it was rock, if it was alternative rock, I don't think those claims would be coming out. They would be like, oh, I was influenced by, or it sounds like, or it's similar to. But the word interpolation, theft, or sampling does not arise from those genres of music. Yeah,
you rarely hear about those stories, so you think it might be motivated by other factors.
I sometimes say that, I
do. So what is the difference between the two processes for people who aren't familiar? So interpolation/replay versus sampling.
Right, so if I'm clearing an interpolation, I'm just contacting the publishers who represent the writers of the composition. If it's a master, I'm contacting both the publishers and the record label, or the people who own the publishing copyright and own the master copyright.
A lot of people don't know that those are the two main types of distinct ownership that a creator has over their work, which is
right. There's 2 sides to a song. Right, there's the music and lyrics that are written, and then on the master side, it's the sound recording.
And they can exploit both types of ownership, and that's what the music business is all about.
Exactly.
So sampling itself and clearing interpolations, it's expensive, and for me, whenever labels have cleared beats that I've sold them that contain samples, if they tell me how much they spent on it, it's usually pretty pricey. So like 4 figures on the high end to 5 figures on the low end, and a lot of unsigned and independent artists want to clear samples before they release albums. And if they're doing that without, say, a service like Tracklib where it's easy and cost effective, how feasible is that?
It's very feasible. I mean, we work with our clients. We try to help them. The biggest problem an unsigned or small artist has is some record labels won't license to them because they're scared they're not going to be able to go after them to collect. But a lot of times what we try to say to people is, can we keep these fees low? I have a client that's like, I'll give up almost all the publishing if you can keep that fee down. I'll give a higher royalty rate if I can keep the fee down. I don't recommend that. I always tell them try to get the money to get those royalties and percentages down, because that's where you get your money. But we try to work with our clients to make sure that we get what they want.
So if an artist is trying to get a sample cleared and that artist isn't using Tracklib, even though they probably should be, can they contact you for help?
Absolutely.
And there's a rumor that you check all your own email.
It's a true rumor. I read every email. I always tell people, if I help you and then you go and do it yourself or hire someone else, don't ever come back to me.
So traditionally, before Tracklib existed, a producer would sell a beat to a label, and they would handle the clearance, and that cost adds up. And you've cleared samples to some of the top selling albums, hip hop albums of the last 5-10 years. So, for example, Drake's albums, you've worked on the sample clearances for those. What does the price tag look like on an album like that with so many samples?
Try not to let people quote based on who's doing the sampling, whether it's Drake or Marshall or Khaled or Jay-Z. The quote should not be based on who's doing the sampling. The quote should be based on the extent of the use, and I stand pretty firm on that one.
But it gets, I mean, just to put it into perspective.
I mean, look at Drake's last album, Scorpion. I mean, look at how many samples were on that album.
So they must have budgeted for a pretty large fee.
Yeah.
In your DJ booth interview, you mentioned some stories of artists not allowing samples to be cleared because of lyrical content. How does Tracklib address that?
When we've gotten people to come on board, we've got language in the contract so that there isn't anything, violence towards women. We avoid politics. We're really careful, and we make it known on the website that if your song is about these certain things, don't even bother sampling, because people don't want that. Even if, and it's not just in the world of sampling, if you go to license a song for synchronization purposes, they will deny. I was doing something for Michael Avenatti, and a lot of people denied it because it was a political message, and so they didn't want to be tied to any political party. Same thing happened with Scientology. They came to me as a client and wanted to clear music for their church, and they were denied straight across the board. So my point is, it's not just sampling in those two categories. It can be for synchronization, and you'll get denied.
And then with regard to clearing with Tracklib, so correct me if I'm wrong. If I make a beat with a sample that isn't from the Tracklib catalog, and I clear that sample for the beat, if someone writes lyrics to it on top of it that may be controversial or just lyrics period, I would have to go back and clear that with the artist once again, right?
Usually, yeah.
But with Tracklib, that's not the case.
That's correct.
So it makes life a lot easier. That was the big thing that I didn't understand about Tracklib, because I didn't know that you could license once and cover the lyrical content preemptively.
Right, but it has language in the contract that if you do something that's controversial in your lyrics, they can pull it down.
So don't work with hateful musicians.
That's
a good rule just in general.
Yeah.
The producer selling a beat to a label scenario, and you mentioned that oftentimes the producer doesn't have any say or control in that case. And that's certainly true for me, and it's certainly true for a lot of my peers who have placed records that contain samples, obviously not through Tracklib, just something they sampled off of a record, because, we've been doing this since the 90s. And it seems to me that's more of the common scenario. So a producer sells a sample-based beat to a major label, and because the major label is buying the master from the producer through the work for hire language, they handle the sample clearance process, and then they handle the negotiations. And so if the rights holder says, well, I want all of the producers publishing, the label just says, yeah, we don't care, just take it. Because that doesn't affect their finances. It doesn't affect them. So it's not a priority for them to make sure that the producer is getting something out of that situation. Under what, and you proposed a few solutions to that, but are there situations in which the producer gets to negotiate the splits or can have some sort of say if he or she is working with a major?
We just did Metro Boomin's album, which was released as an artist rather than a producer. And then he brought a lot of other people in. And we made sure in dealing with him and his manager, Rika, that he had control and say over absolutely every aspect of it. If my clients tell me who the producers are and loop me in, then I make sure that the producers and their attorneys are aware of the situation so that they have a voice. But if you're a producer and you're making beats, it's really important that you have someone be your voice, whether you're doing it yourself, a manager, or an attorney. And I think it's your producer's contract that's really going to protect you, which is if there's a sample in the song, that it comes off the top. Even huge artists like Marshall, the sample comes off the top. He takes the hit, even if he's not the one who put the sample in. And so you have to look at every situation that you're dealing with. A lot of the labels, like for example, Def Jam, Republic, and Interscope, the artist actually tells the label who to hire to do their clearances. And so the label has given up that power of control. They step in, they put in their 2 cents. There's a great team over there, but they make sure that the artist and the producers are satisfied. I think Atlantic now does everything in-house, or they use another clearance company now. And so, you don't have as much control of the situation.
So the takeaway is either use Tracklib or contact DMG, and you'll be okay.
It's a good...
not mine. But
it's good.
That's what it sounds like to me.
I'm not going to argue, but I got to add something too. I think the words we use are misleading in a way too. Producers are songwriters as well. And I think a lot of producers are selling themselves short. By technical definition, you write the song and you produce the song. And in today's landscape, with more people being all in one, we actually have more roles, and just to be aware of that fact means that, of course, if you've written the song and you are the songwriter, it's reasonable that you have part of the publishing split, even by sort of technical rights definition.
And producers used to not get writers. Look at the Beatles.
Yeah.
Producer did not get any credit. The Stones, the Doors. So if you go back and look at the music of the 60s and the 70s, even the 80s, the producers really didn't get any writer share, publishing share. They got artist royalties producer royalties, and that was it. Whether you like hip hop and rap or sampling or not, they changed the entire landscape of how deals are done. So you can have a pop song without any samples, and that producer now gets writer credit and publishing credit. They didn't get it prior to the hip hop and sample world. People do not give this genre of music and sampling the historical props that it deserves, and that's a piece of it.
Amen.
Yeah, I agree with that.
But I gotta push this point, because the language is archaic as well. Even if you look at different roles when you register a publishing split, there's composer, arranger, composer, arranger. A lot of new songs don't have an arranger as such. There's there will be a composer, and the composer would be the same person as the producer is. So my point is, some of these terms are even misleading. If you've written the song and you've produced the song, you are a songwriter and a producer. I think it's an important point to make.
I think it's a great point. It's antiquated, and it's actually something that we should address on Wednesday when we see a bunch of people that are publishers.
Yes, you're right. Let's bring that up Wednesday.
I will.
There's a lot to address. It seems as though the world of music is changing so fast every day, and the only part of it that's not changing is the way the labels and the publishers contact business, and then the way the laws respond to the technology.
It's changing, though. We're getting there. You've got the Music Modernization Act that just finally passed, although the changes really won't happen until 2020, but I'm actually going to start going to Washington December 11th to be actively involved in that. So we can get the laws to change. You're right. Music used to be something that you bought on vinyl. And then we had, let's skip the 8-track and cassette world, okay? Let's go straight to CD.
I love cassettes. That was my era.
Yeah, I love cassettes. We can't skip cassettes. I'm sorry, I'm putting my veto in, but yeah.
Well, no one complained about them. Do you know what I mean? And then it was CDs. Then it was MP3s. Now, MP3s and downloading is going to become obsolete, and it's streaming. And so, again, technology, the way we make music, the way we distribute music, the way we use music, the way music is part of our lives, it's always evolving and changing. I mean, that's where DMG is really part of all this stuff, because we don't just do sample clearances, we do synchronization, we deal with games. Google's our client, Facebook is our client. And as everything is progressing and changing, we're there in the forefront to make sure that the writers, the artists, and the music is protected. but that bridge still stays intact between technology and music. So you're right. There's a lag, and the labels and publishers need to catch up, but they're trying as hard as they can.
And I would add to that, I mean, sort of behavior in terms of what we do are always slower than the systems that regulate the behavior. And I think especially in the music industry, having been so kind of frontline focused on the latest releases, building systems around data and clean data, it hasn't been a priority. It is a priority now in the digital world. I mean, a lot of the important stuff that we do at Tracklib is never visible. You know, we chase data, we wash and scrub stuff. You know, we never trust any data we receive before we've double or triple checked it, you know, to figure out, are these displays? Are you sure these are displays? Is this the IPI number? Have you double checked it? You know, so it all has to be intact. And I mean that, you know, if you look at some of the large vaults of music today, they got paper card systems. They don't even have a database to look, you know, for the inventory, you know. So there's so much to do. But it is happening, and it's being forced by actual behavior, because we expect today, as listeners, right or wrong, to access all the music in the world, you know, at the click of a button. You know, people should be able to dig through the crates of the world and license it at the click of a button. Some of the legacy systems have, you know, there's work to be done for them to catch up. But I also think it's the inevitable force of transparency that's driven by digital, where a lot of people, I mean, the old way of thinking about information and data is that if I sit on it and I protect it, that provides a unique advantage. Today, you don't survive if you don't share. And that kind of sharing mindset of transparency is just starting to break through in an industry that, you know, has been focused on the latest releases and is now sort of expanding that mindset. It's going to take time, but, you know, we're seeing good things. And, you know, our job is to build new infrastructure to fix some of this stuff.
Yeah, and Tracklib is obviously addressing quite a few of these concerns at once, and so I imagine that moving forward, and I'll ask one more question about this in a second. I imagine moving forward that systems such as Tracklib and other emerging systems that force the change to occur, we're going to see the impact of those in the coming years, and it's going to happen pretty quickly. So how does a producer or a recording artist or a label or manager, how do they sign up and start using Tracklib?
Well, it's simple. You go to tracklib.com, so tracklib.com. Signing up is free. You know, you pay for what you use. So it's accessible for anyone with a web browser. So it would exclude, I think, the latest cybersecurity chief of Japan, which has never used a computer, but everyone else should be fine. So tracklib.com and then log in.
So you log in, you browse the music, and you just click it and license it. It's just like Apple Music or something like that.
But it's built for producers. So the thing is, you can search, you know, by BPM or by release year or by key. You know, so you could search for R&B soul vocals from 1960 to 74 in A minor below 120 BPM. You know. And when you find a song that you like, you'll find more related. You can click the label. You can find more from that label. All the stuff that we as producers have wanted from other music services, but it's like, I can't click the label name, you know, or I can't sort of search the way I want to. So this is, again, made for people looking for great sounds.
I see why Tracklib kept coming up as a solution for a scenario in which a producer samples but doesn't want to go through the hassle of clearing. Just go to Tracklib, find the same key, tempo, genre, and just replace it with that.
Right. I mean, it make it very easy, but I think the fun part, and actually how I've gotten really excited about Tracklib, is getting stuff that hasn't been used, stuff that's really eclectic, stuff that's, you know, you got to be careful when you talk to publishers and labels. You don't want to offend them. But material that's like low-hanging fruit, that's dead, that hasn't been earning any revenue, that's the stuff that I personally want to see get into Tracklib and get used. We kind of forget about things. You know, everyone thinks James Brown has always been a household name. James Brown's career died out. You know, there was that whole time period where, you know, not a lot of people knew what his music was. Sampling is what really helped a lot of people know who James Brown was, who Earth, Wind, and Fire, who the Isley Brothers are, Syl Johnson, Hamilton Bohannon. So there's a lot of stuff. And that was back in the 80s and the 90s. So things have changed now, but we've got more stuff going on now. So I love this idea of taking stuff, great music, eclectic music. I mean, there's polka music there's crazy music in Tracklib. And there were some young producers at my house that were listening to it and they're like, shit, I can make a beat out of that. So, I mean, that's what is exciting about Tracklib. So yeah, you can be the lazy man and say, I'm looking for something in a certain key, a certain BPM, certain year, certain that. But then you could also go in and you got lost listening to stuff, right? You could just go in and just start playing stuff.
It's a rabbit hole, yeah.
Yeah, and you're just going, wow, what can I do with this? Or I don't know. That's what's fun.
I agree. I mean, I found stuff, and sadly I don't have enough time to listen because running a company takes a little bit of time. But, whenever I go on now and check out our latest stuff, most of it, I would say the majority stuff I've never heard. And I'm an avid collector listener since a long time. And, it's so obvious, painfully obvious that, I've just listened to the tiniest fraction of all the music out there. And I think especially when we saw the Chinese catalog coming in, and then we saw contemporary trap producers using that old Chinese music, that was proof that this is awesome. We had a huge delivery of Brazilian music, which is now taken off. But more than that, some of the alternate takes and the unreleased studio takes with the studio chatter, all of that stuff, which, to unearth that and to get inspired by that, I think is really cool. And the big part, and obviously, our job is to make it accessible for anyone to sample original recordings. And that's simple. What we're really excited about is the cultural impact of that and the creative impact of that in sort of musical diasporas meeting. And that hasn't happened before. A lot of the music still goes, I think, there's a site called Forgotify dedicated to all the music never streamed on Spotify. And there's so much music today that never gets discovered in the way that discovery algorithms are built. So that's one of our built-in missions, to get people to discover really strange stuff, and there's lots of it out there.
Certainly, and I'm glad you brought up James Brown too, Deborah, because one of the major sources of rediscovery for James Brown were his breakbeats, and the man behind funky drummer Clyde Stubblefield lived and died in my city, and it's a tragic story that brings up another can of worms, which is that a lot of session players who created these integral parts of music that generated, hundreds of thousands of dollars through sample clearance, because of how the music business worked back then and how it still works to a degree, they had no ownership in the songs, and so this man his family had to crowdfund to pay for his funeral expenses. So it was really awful to see, and we know James Brown died a multimillionaire. So nowadays, I think the technology is allowing instrumentalists to create their own sample kits, for example, and sell those. And it's opened all these additional revenue streams. Given all these problems with, the previous traditional music industry problems with musicians and creators not being able to take full advantage of the revenue streams that should have been available to them, how do you think, and this is a big can of worms to open up, but how do you see technology evolving in the next 5 years to accommodate some of these needs for creatives?
I'm just going to jump on this because, back to Stubblefield as well, a huge part is neighboring rights, and anything that has, well, at least in one spelling, boring in the name is often overlooked, as in the neighboring rights, but they're so important to performers and artists. And, just to get the concept on registering rights, a lot of revenues, before commenting on the future question, so much is lost. I mean, the Swedish performing neighboring rights society here, SAMI, they even advertised to say, we've collected millions and we don't know who to pay because the registrations never came in. So part of what we built in to our model and our license is to encourage people to register the recording rights with, Sound Exchange in the US for the digital neighboring rights, or PPL in the UK or Sami here in Sweden. So, because a lot of people just overlook them, right? And I think in making these,
yeah, in the United States, we didn't have, didn't sign the Rome Convention, so the neighboring rights didn't come into effect, except in digital with Sound Exchange. And
yes,
artists
exactly.
like Jay-Z and Kanye recorded their stuff in Paris and overseas, and then all configurations would qualify for neighboring rights. It's a really valid conversation and argument that you make about all these artists and musicians that don't see revenue because of their involvement. Maybe they were just a work for hire. Maybe they were just paid union. The unions did try to do something with the reuse and union fees on audio recordings, but it's only $400. That's all it is. And then it's a percentage after they sell a certain amount of money, and then that's a percentage. And I really don't know how much of that money is actually getting collected and paid out. So how do you fix something that's broken, that's been broken for a long time? I don't have the answer for that. Moving forward, though, I think the way things are done, people are more protected with their contracts so that they are seeing more revenue. But this didn't just happen in the music industry. Remember, this happened in film and television.
All creative industries.
You look at Seinfeld and see how much money Jerry Seinfeld made on the reruns of his show, but a lot less for the other actors. So this is something that's always taken place in all forms of entertainment, where the large corporations make the money, the top artist makes the money, and then the support doesn't. So hopefully that'll change.
I think there's a built-in kind of conflict between really good admin skills and really good creative skills, usually, and the systems built, and agreeing with you 100%, Deborah, sort of, the systems built are so hard to use, even to do a song registration with any given PRO for the publishing is a terrible process. It's like a form decided by a true sadist, it's so hard to understand. Publishing splits to most people, and even sort of savvy, mathematically minded people don't make sense. Why do we have different pies? Why is, one set 100% and the other one 200%? So, I mean, there's no coherent standard or design in this, which means that since it's so hard to register, there's so much revenues lost just because of lack of correct registrations. And I think, again, coming back to this gap between the creative and admin mindsets, that's where technology has a job to play, to lower the threshold, to make it easier to sort of, follow some of the rules, do the right registrations, and know what to do. I think that's where we'll see a lot of innovation. A lot of the, and I'm, not being too specific, but a lot of the large institutions in music have over the years realized that if we're not transparent, if we don't share data, we're going to be in a very lonely place in a decade, right? Maybe even half a decade. So we're moving more towards data sharing. And data sharing is a key part of this whole system to work. I didn't know when I put out music, more than 12, way back when, another life. But I didn't know to register with more than one PRO, for example. I only registered with the Swedish one. I know that I have tons of revenue from other territories that were never collected because I didn't know. I didn't know, and even my publisher didn't know at the time. We should have, they had a very Scandinavian focus, but not a global mindset at the time. And it's just knowledge on how these systems work. And, sifting through all of that is so complicated that people just get it out and then, get the music out. And then you just sort of do registrations sort of after the fact. But what people miss is if you don't release and do a song registration pretty synchronized, you can lose out on substantial revenues in just some territories because of the way things work, right? So it's, again, we'll see more sharing of data, more unification of sort of systems, and easier access to most people. And I think with that gives producers, songwriters, really the people making the music more control over their destiny.
I am waiting for the day that there's a unified system that brings mechanicals together with performance royalties and, revenue generated from sales that aren't mechanicals and sound exchange and everything. Because it is really crazy, especially for independent or unsigned artists doing it all themselves, to have to register with multiple PROs to have to figure out the mechanical side with HFA, which might change with the Music Modernization Act. My fingers are crossed. But yeah, it's a lot to ask. So I'm going to end with an easy question. How do people find your respective companies online and get in contact with you?
Well, I'm Deborah. The company's www.dmgclearances.com, and my email, deborah@dmgclearances.com, is there on my website. My website lists my fees, very transparent, who my clients are, what my fees are, who my staff is. We even have pictures and our dogs up there. So you can Google me. I'm pretty easy to find. I don't have to write my name on a bathroom wall anymore. People seem to know how to get to me.
That's good. And we're simple to www.tracklib.com, as in track library or track liberation, I should say. So tracklib.com. You want to hit us up with anything, we have hello@tracklib.com as a general contact. And if it's something specific, it's support@tracklib.com. Come check it out and get lost in the rabbit hole.